It breaks my heart. 90-Day Fiancé's Brandon Gibbs shares moving tribute to loved one after Julia Trubkina reveals heartbreaking news of death. 90-Day. The Last Resort star Brandon Gibbs has posted a heartfelt tribute to his loved one who recently passed away after weeks of health issues, as revealed by Julia Trubkina. Brandon is a pest control technician from Virginia who met Julia from Russia via a friend and brought her to the US on a K-1 visa in 90-Day Fiancé Season 8. Julia and Brandon disagreed on things such as her wanting to work as a go-go dancer, or Julia refusing to have kids. Brandon and Julia sought couples therapy, where they learned to resolve their differences. Brandon wished for Julia to get a second opinion regarding her pregnancy woes from a doctor in America, but until then, Julia was happy being a dog mom. Julia had 2 dogs, Nulla and Simba. On Saturday, May 3, 2025, Julia announced that her dog Simba had passed away. Brandon took to Instagram to talk about Simba's death. He shared some sweet memories with Simba in a carousel post, including photos of Julia and them having a beach day with their 2 puppies. Brandon captioned it, "It breaks my heart to see a member of our family go." He added that a part of Simba would always be with them in their memories and hearts. What Simba's loss means for Brandon and Julia's relationship. Brandon has proved their relationship has strengthened after the last resort. As Brandon noted, Simba was like a member of the family. Julia had been told she could never have children, so she raised Simba as her own. She was grief-stricken when he suddenly fell ill from a stroke a few weeks ago, unsure of what to do or which doctor to consult. She and Brandon cared for their ailing dog during his recovery, but Julia shared the challenges they faced, such as carrying and walking Simba, who weighed 85 pounds. Still, Julia had Brandon by her side during the difficult time. He even sent her on a vacation to help relieve her stress. The couple has faced ups and downs in their marriage over the past 5 years, but nothing could have prepared them for the loss of a pet who was like a child to them. Their German Shepherd also inspired Julia's latest business, Kingdom of Dogs, which she recently launched and is now thriving. Our take on Brandon's emotional message for his son with Julia. Brandon and Julia are seeking the support of fans. For anyone who thought Brandon and Julia's bond was weak and wouldn't survive couples therapy, this moment confirms they're still together a year after filming 90-Day, The Last Resort. Fans are reaching out to offer their condolences, prayers, and words of support as the couple copes with the loss of a loved one. It will likely take time for them to recover from such a devastating event in their lives. Are Brandon Gibbs and Julia Trubkina still together after 90-Day, The Last Resort Season 2? Brandon Gibbs and Julia Trubkina were one of the couples who worked to save their relationship on 90-Day, The Last Resort Season 2. Throughout the season, Brandon and Julia went through numerous ups and downs at the resort. While they were the strongest couple at times, they were also one of the less stable pairs on other occasions. During the recommitment ceremony, Brandon and Julia decided to continue their relationship. But are they still together today? Why did Brandon Gibbs and Julia Trubkina appear on 90-Day, The Last Resort Season 2? Photo credit, BFC/Paul Hill via TLC. Brandon and Julia originally appeared on 90-Day Fiancé Season 8, when Julia moved to America from Russia. At the time, the couple's most significant issue was Julia not wanting to live on Brandon's parents' farm. They later returned for 90-Day Fiancé, Happily Ever After, where they continued to work toward building an independent life together. During the premiere of The Last Resort Season 2, however, the couple revealed new struggles in their marriage. Brandon admitted that he and Julia weren't on the same page about having children. While Brandon wanted to start a family, Julia was no longer sure that's what she wanted. Initially, this seemed to be the biggest issue for the couple. In the following weeks, however, several other big problems in their marriage were revealed. Brandon and Julia faced many obstacles during The Last Resort Season 2. Early on in Season 2, Brandon became frustrated with Julia during a group night out at a bar. Julia was eager to have a good time and even got up onto the bar to dance. Brandon wasn't pleased with her actions and begged her to get down as he felt she was exposing herself. This led to an argument where Brandon told Julia he wanted to be married to someone ready to be a mother. Julia's feelings were hurt by the comment and a rift began to form between them. The biggest reveal for Brandon and Julia this season came during the camping retreat. In a moment of honesty, Julia admitted that she cheated on Brandon at the beginning of their relationship. When Julia was still living in Russia, she kissed her ex-boyfriend and the two contemplated getting back together. Brandon was shocked to hear this, however, he heard Julia out and forgave her. A few days later, Julia dropped another secret she had been keeping on Brandon. In a session with Brandon's parents Betty and Ron, Julia told everyone that she had applied for visas for her parents. Brandon wasn't aware of this and was once again stunned by his wife's revelation. While Julia was eager for her parents to come to the United States, Brandon was worried about the possibility. Despite Brandon proclaiming that divorce was becoming a bigger possibility for him and Julia, the couple once again reconciled. Are Brandon and Julia still together today? At the end of the retreat, Brandon and Julia were one of 3 couples who decided to recommit. 1 year later, they are still married and committed today. The Last Resort Season 2 was filmed in the spring of 2024. Over the summer, Julia shared a photo of her and Brandon on Instagram captioned, "Now I just want to work on what we have." A few weeks later, Julia and Brandon shared posts of their travels together throughout various countries. During the first part of the Season 2 tell-all, Brandon and Julia arrived together as a couple. The tell-all seems to have been filled in the last 2 months, so this is another key sign that the couple is still together. In the first tell-all episode, Brandon revealed that he and Julia were still not on the same page about children or her parents. However, there was no indication that the two were thinking of splitting ways. 90 Day, The Last Resort's Brandon needs to stop trying to change Julia. Brandon Gibbs and Julia Trubkina are one of the franchise couples to join 90 Day, The Last Resort, but I'm starting to notice a big issue between the couple. Brandon and Julia first appeared in 90 Day Fiancé Season 8. Since then, they've appeared in several 90 Day Fiancé franchise series, but more recently joined the more low-key spin-offs like 90 Day Diaries. Their time together was certainly filled with hurdles they needed to overcome. Julia was homesick and hated living with Brandon's parents. She also hated farm life and didn't want to spend her days doing grueling work with the farm animals. While they were able to overcome some issues, such as moving out, it seems that the couple has a new set of issues. Their intimacy is lacking. Brandon wants kids and Julia wants her family in the US. They can't form an agreement or compromise, hence why they joined the newest spin-off. However, I think Brandon might be forcing the issues and making Julia change into someone she's not without considering her wants and needs. Although I understand relationships are about compromise and growing together, Brandon needs to take a step back and reevaluate how he's approaching the situation. The Last Resort's Julia wants to find herself again. A major issue for Brandon right now is the lack of intimacy between the two. Julia doesn't want to have sex, especially because she knows Brandon's hoping for children. However, Brandon became offended by Julia's sexy attire and promiscuous behavior at the club. To him, it didn't make sense that Julia would act sexy for the public, but not for him. While I understand his thought process and would likely feel similarly if I was in the same position, I think Brandon's focusing too much on himself. Julia's actions reflect more on herself and her own desires. She even tried to explain to Brandon that she wanted to let loose and have more fun. Truthfully, I think Julia wants to find herself again. After being in America away from her family and in a relationship for XX years, she probably feels like she's lost parts of herself. Keep in mind, people are still recovering from the COVID-19 lockdown and reintegrating their lives with society. Plus, if Julia's ready to consider children, then she might want to have a few last hurrahs before integrating into motherhood. While I agree her actions don't portray her in the best light, Julia is still being honest and upfront with Brandon instead of hiding it. I think she might benefit a lot more from letting loose in a safe place with her husband around than her trying to ignore the parts that want to be released. 90 Day Fiancé's Brandon will only push Julia away. I think Brandon's also upset by Julia's behavior because dancing on bars and dressing proactively is not how he'd handle a situation. However, Brandon needs to remember that they are two different people with vastly distinct personalities. Brandon's always been more quiet and reserved. Meanwhile, Julia is more bubbly and quick-witted. They think differently. They act differently, and most of all, they process differently. Forcing Julia to act more like Brandon or act in a way he deems more acceptable is only going to drive a bigger wedge between the two. If Brandon practiced more acceptance, even though he disagreed, Julia would feel more support, which would benefit him a lot more. If Brandon could show Julia that even in tough times he can be supportive, she might be more willing to have children and grow a family. Brandon would show her that he could be the husband she needed. As the old saying goes, opposites attract, but this can also lead to the far too common problem seen with Brandon and Julia. When the relationship is good, they seem to mesh perfectly well, but when things are bad, they can't seem to find a healthy middle ground. Overall, I think this couple needs to work on communication and be more supportive. No couple will agree on everything, but how they handle their disagreements is crucial, and Brandon can certainly repair their marriage a lot more by being supportive, even if he